Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show, by any host, or by any guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before you begin any new diet, exercise, or training program. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Welcome to Healing Ties on the Whole Care Network. On Healing Ties, we're creating a life to love after caregiving ends by sharing stories and resources and being with awesome people like you. Now that caregiving has ended, let the Healing Ties begin. Here's your host, Chris McClellan, the Bow Tie Guy.
Well, greetings, everyone. It is Chris McClellan, the Bow Tie Guy, for another episode of Healing Ties. Thanks for joining me today. Certainly want to send out a hello and a shout out to all of our friends and listeners in the UK on ukhealthradio.com. We thank you for your continued support of the show. And, as always, we thank everybody for listening. We appreciate your feedback. If you have an idea for a show or a topic you'd like to cover, please send me an email at WeCare, that's WeCare, WeCare at wholecarenetwork.com. We're always looking for creative ideas because, on the Whole Care Network, we're all about story sharing. We believe that it's through story sharing where diversity meets the road to combat a common cause. And our common cause here on Healing Ties and the Whole Care Network is caregiving. We believe caregivers need three things. Validation, yes. Caregiving can be hard, and it's okay to feel the way that you feel. We need respite. Goodness, I should have taken my own advice while I was in the middle of caregiving. Respite is so important, even if you just can take 5 minutes a day for yourself. And the other thing we need as caregivers is resources. And usually the best resources are from one caregiver to another because we've been in the caregiving trenches. And, one of the great things that I get to do from these podcasts and being involved in the caregiving community is I get to meet awesome people from across the country who are caregiver advocates, caregivers themselves. And I've got a special guest today that I've been excited to have on for quite a while, Michelle Seitzer. Michelle writes about caregiving and lives the caregiving life too. She's also the co-moderator of Once Weekly Care Chat, cares for her daughter with special needs, and helped care for her beloved grandparents who passed away in 2009 and 2017. And Michelle, it not only is a delight to have you on the show, it's my honor to have you. You've just been one of my, I've just admired your work from afar and just
Chris,
thanks for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me and for that very warm welcome and introduction. I'm blushing here, so
well, the truth will set you free. It's all good.
It's very kind, and I've loved working with you. I think I did at least one, maybe two articles with some really terrific input from you, Chris.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and I do.
I love working with you.
I think we did do two articles, one on our caregiving story and then another one, I think about a year ago on LGBT caregiving. But it's such an important topic, and you're such a fabulous writer. But first of all, tell our listeners a little bit about you, your background, what you're currently doing, and
sure.
we'll get into our chat today.
Okay, great. Well, it's a delight and an honor to be here. And I am a writer, but I am becoming more comfortable with speaking as the years go on, pushing myself to do more of it. But my comfort zone really is writing, so hopefully I will do just as well with the speaking. But since I was a little girl, really as soon as I could hold a pencil, I was writing and making up stories. So I loved your introduction and words about stories and how important they are, because they really do tie people together. And it's always been just the way I think, to learn new things through stories and to discover the world through different points of view through stories. So I love that now in the work I'm doing, I get to do that with the subject matter of caregiving, which is something that has always been near and dear to my heart. So I guess it started too when I was growing up as the oldest of 5 girls. So I just sort of naturally fell into a caregiving role. My mom stayed at home with us, so it wasn't that she was working and I was left with the kids, but it just came naturally to me. I was very much, the type A big sister, and got told very often, "You're not my mom." So I must have been trying to assert that role. But I just felt responsible for my sisters and wanted to help my mom and my parents, and I enjoyed it. It just felt natural to me. So I think was being prepared for other caregiving roles to come in those early days as a big sister. My youngest sister was born when I was 14. So
okay,
quite a fan of ages. So, and then sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, I was going to say we have that in common, as I'm the youngest of 6.
Oh, wow.
And
okay.
There's quite a age difference between my next oldest sister is 8 years older than me.
Wow.
My oldest sister is 18 years older than me. So we
Yes.
connect from opposite ends of the child chart. But
right. So that's so interesting. Yeah, I think with big families, you tend to get that age spread. So, but wow, 18 years that's 2 different life.
Yeah, I've got nieces. I have nieces and nephews my age. So,
wow, that's fantastic.
You got the caregiving gene. Yeah, you got the caregiving gene infused in you early.
I did. So, yes, but my grandparents were always a big part of my life. My mom's parents, in fact, we lived in a basement apartment of their home in Brooklyn, New York when I was born. And I guess my grandfather used to say to my grandmother, "What are they doing to that baby down there?" Because I cried a lot as an infant. But they were in my life, since the beginning. So I always was very close to them and loved and cherished them. And that really, I think for me, sparked my interest in older adults and elders. But I also, as I said, was a writer from early on and a storyteller. And I think that is another aspect of loving older adults that drew me in, was hearing their stories. I mean, in my time working in different assisted living communities while I was in college and after college, both in volunteer and paid positions, I just loved hearing their stories. Some of them had traveled, to countless countries. Some of them had invented things. Hearing their career stories, it just fascinated me, and I loved connecting with them that way. So I got into working in elder care during college. I did some volunteer work while I was a student. And then actually before I even graduated, I was offered a position as an activities director at the community where I had been volunteering.
Wow.
So that was a really great, just eased right into the position. It was very different working there full time than, coming in as a volunteer. Really got to see the inner workings of the place, and for better and worse. And that is what sparked my advocacy interest, because I really saw a lot of things that I wanted to fix and change. And with my idealistic vision and energy of, a 22-year-old, I said, I have to do something. I have to get the next degree, take the next step, so people will listen to me and fix these problems. And long story short, I didn't end up getting an advanced degree, but I've been now for the last 10 years writing in this space and using my writing voice to advocate for older adults, but also over the years have started writing more about their caregivers and the needs there. And I did see in my time in the nursing homes and assisted livings that I worked at, I did see the impact on the caregiver. As the activities director, I was out and about. I was always moving. I was never in my office, and I would get stopped by family members. Can you just sit with mom and play a game of cards with her? She's so lonely. Or they'd just come to me crying because they just had a visit that didn't go well, or, the dementia was advancing and their mom was no longer able to communicate and in the way that she did before. And so I did see all of that in that time. And but then when my grandfather was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, then it really hit home. And I got to know how a caregiver feels on a very personal level, not just professional. So just had a lot of experiences that came together, and started freelance writing in the elder care space in 2008, November 2008, just about 10 years ago. And since then have really expanded what I write about to include not just the care of older adults, but care of children, care of teenagers, care of spouses of all ages with various health problems, and have really found the needs and challenges are quite universal. So that is,
Oh boy, yes, universal is so correct. And I think you touched on a number of areas that I wanted to chat with you about today, but I want to I'm going to jump into the last one first.
Sure.
I think with folks like yourself who are putting pen to the paper and writing about these stories, we're starting to recognize this vast network of caregiving, this caregiving sphere. I think there's been I don't think misinformation is the right word, but a sense of reality that people have always thought that caregiving was for really only related to seniors or older adults, but that's really not true. And you have your own personal experience caring for your daughter, but there are thousands upon thousands of caregiving situations out there. I would probably need to say millions that are not just caring for seniors. I think of high school kids who are caring for their parents who have ALS, and the impact that has. Caregiving impacts pretty much all of society and all different ages.
Right. Yes, and I think too we tend to forget that parents are caregivers.
Yes.
As long as your children are 100% dependent on you and living under your roof, you are their caregiver. If they get sick at school, then you have to pick them up. When they need a well check, you take them to the doctor. We have to look at it for what it is, and I think a lot of caregivers don't self-identify early enough. They don't put value on what they're doing, and I think that's something I'd really like to explore more in writing, because there are so many people out there who are serving in a caregiving role, and it is not limited to, well, you have to help mom, balance her checkbook and pick up the pens for her, or bathe her once a week. I think a lot of people still have that vision of the caregiver as this hands-on daily personal care, individual, and that's certainly part of it for some people, but there are many ways that people of all ages are caring for someone else. So, and
you could even be caring for a neighbor and not even recognize that you're doing some chores or odd jobs. The person living next door is by themselves. You notice that they're struggling in some areas, and all of a sudden you're not only physically involved with some of the day-to-day tasks, you're emotionally involved, and that's when it really gets to be difficult.
Exactly, and as far as valuing what you do, it's also important to value the emotional weight of caregiving, because again, we think in that limited hands-on model and don't think of the emotional and mental toll that caregiving takes, and no matter what level of involvement you're at. So I think that's something really important for caregivers to recognize is, maybe you just took mom to the doctor and that's all you did today to help, but maybe you got some really bad news at the doctor's office, and that's going to stick with you. And that's going to, you have to process through that. And when I was a new mom, we adopted our daughter when she was just about 3. And she has some different health issues and special needs. And when I was learning to balance her care with my work, I really had to be aware of my scheduling, because sometimes we had back-to-back appointments, or even one appointment that would take maybe 2 hours, half an hour of waiting in the room for the doctor, besides being in the waiting room first, and she would get really agitated by that. So I would be exhausted and frazzled sometimes when we'd come back from those appointments, and then I'd, get her down for a nap, and now I have to write an article, and somehow I have to come up with something that sounds good and has a beginning, middle, and end, and meets the criteria of the client and is in by the deadline. And some days that was really hard to do after what we had just experienced. So I think that it's something all caregivers need to tune into, is leaving room in the margins for that emotional weight of caregiving.
Well, that was said by a true writer, leaving room in the margins. I like that. I like that analogy.
Yes, I heard that at a caregiving conference that I actually helped plan. It's for an adoptive moms network that I was part of and quite active in for a while. And we had this speaker come in, and he talked about leaving room in the margins, and it really stuck with me, probably because of the writer in me.
Because of the writer.
But my to-do list tend to get, tend to get out into the margins, and I do have to step back and say, okay, this list is looking like, I need some more breathing room in there. So
I think we just created the name for this podcast, Making Rooms in the Margins.
Yes.
So there we go.
I like it.
I like it too. And isn't it interesting, Michelle, as a writer, I'm pretty sure you're going to get this 100%, that all these different experiences as it relates to caregiving, whether it's caring for a daughter, whether it's caring for your grandparents, your neighbor, there's one thing that's relatable is there's stories in each one of those experiences. And I'm just a big believer that, stories break down barriers. Sure, there's cultural differences, but when you get right down to it, stories is really what takes down barriers, because we can all get in touch with a story, especially when they're currently in caregiving, or like myself and after caregiving. It's stories which really helps us.
Yes, and the place that you're in, Chris, I think that's something else we have to change the culture on, is after caregiving, there's a transition, but there's still a story there. There's the grief that you go through, and the way that changes your life and transforms your life, really. I'm still really struggling with my grandparents' death. They were very, very special to me. And, whenever I see a grandparent and a grandchild together, I feel that tinge, and I feel that pain. But it does motivate me to share my story in hopes that other people will cherish the time that they have with their grandparents. So, but caregiving, it's really a lifelong journey. If you've had a caregiving experience, that experience doesn't end when the caree passes away. It's really just this transition into a new part of the journey. So.
New part of the journey, and you for me, being in what I like to say after caregiving, yeah, I have to learn
Mm-hmm.
how to now be a caregiver to myself, because
Mm-hmm.
you
Sure.
may or may not have heard me say this before, but I feel like I'm the poster child for what not to do after caregiving ends. I just
Right.
made so
Mm-hmm.
many poor emotional, physical, spiritual, and financial decisions that were
Mm-hmm.
fraught with, because of I made those decisions out of emotions that
Mm-hmm.
suddenly, you, as quickly as caregiving starts, it starts because of an untimely diagnosis or an unfortunate accident, and then it
Mm-hmm.
ends. And we're oftentimes
Mm-hmm.
not prepared for either one of these life-changing events. And that's why, at least for me, it's just so, again, it comes back to the story sharing. It's
Right.
important to share the stories, because
Yeah.
there's some healing. There's some healing, at least for me now, that in sharing the story.
Absolutely. And that's something that we stress in Care Chat, the weekly Twitter chat that I moderate with Denise Brown and Amy Goyer and Lillian Lake. Anyone is welcome who's in any stage of a caregiving journey. We meet at 1 p.m. ET on Tuesdays. But we have people caring for children. We have people caring for parents. We have young people caring for parents. We have people who cared for spouses, and the spouse has passed away, and the caregiver is still part of the group, and their stories are so important to those of us who are still in the trenches. They're the lessons they've learned, the things that they're experiencing now, in kind of finding their identity after caregiving ends. So we need all of those stories. We need all of those voices, and I love that so much about Care Chat, because it's across ages. There's across diagnoses. There's any number of needs that are being met by the people in this group, and it's just such a supportive community. And there's not really much that people in the group don't understand about someone else's situation, even though their caregiving story could be drastically different. The themes are still very much the same. It's that need for validation, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
It's that need for respite, and it's that need for having somebody to come alongside you and say, are you taking care of yourself?
Right.
Are you getting the support you need? That mentorship is really important. And
so
I think
it's so
that
important, because one of the areas of caregiving that I did not learn while in the midst of it, and I like to share with caregivers when I have the opportunity, is, and I can see when when I say this to them, their eyes kind of cross and they're kind of look in the sky. They don't really get it, but self-care is probably the most important thing for a family caregiver. Learning the art of self-care, because that's job number one. And that is an area that I failed at I failed at really well, if that makes any sense.
It does.
Yeah, learning the importance of self-care is I just think critical for caregivers. And I think, again, we learn that through sharing our experiences, because we can touch base. We could talk to a caregiver who we've never met. We've had the pleasure of meeting in person, but you can talk to somebody online without knowing them, yet you do know them because of our ability to share the stories.
Absolutely. Yeah, and self-care is it's individualized. It's not going to look the same for everyone. So as a caregiver, you really have to learn that about yourself. What fills me up, and what do I need? It's not just going to the spa, once a year. And actually, I've been seeing a counselor over the past year, and she said, "What do you do for self-care?" And I said, "Well, I get a massage, a couple times a year." And she sort of laughed at me. But I tell that story now because, she was right. Really, you have to be intentional about it every day. And that doesn't mean you go get a massage every day. But, every day you take 5 minutes to just sit and try to shut the brain off if you can, or just take 5 minutes with a cup of tea on the porch. And it sounds maybe cliche, or it sounds too easy, but it's really not, especially when you're a caregiver and you're being pulled in a lot of directions. Just to sit and give yourself 5 minutes peace is a discipline, but you have to invest in yourself so you can be investing in the person you're caring for.
That 5 minutes, setting that daily intention for yourself, it does. It has an impact, and
it does.
And even after caregiving ends, you get into this and the routine that you still think you can do this all by yourself, but you really can't.
Right.
And,
right.
Setting that intention is so important. So goodness, I want to come back to the care chat.
Sure.
Is that every Tuesday, or is it every other Tuesday?
It is.
What is the schedule?
It's every Tuesday. So every Tuesday at 1:00 Eastern time on Twitter.
On Twitter.
Just use that.
Use the hashtag care chat.
Yeah.
And of course, I know Denise. I know Amy, and there's another person that you had mentioned.
Yes, Lillian Lake, who has a group called Compassion Consultancy, and she is wonderful about talking about self-care and compassion for oneself through caregiving. So she has a really strong advocacy voice in a lot of different areas. She's currently doing some training on working with grieving children. So it's really a dynamic group of people, not just the leaders, everybody that attends, regular attenders, and we're always adding new people, and always happy to have people drop in when they can. We all understand you can't maybe come every week, but in many ways it's become a support group. It's not just informational. There are a lot of resource sharing times in the chat, but much of it is really a support group setting, just virtually.
Well, I think it'd be great to do a podcast with all four of you.
Oh, that would be so much fun.
Wouldn't that be fun?
I'd love to do that. Yeah,
we can make that happen. That'd be. I haven't stopped by Care Chat in a while, but I guess I need to reconnect.
You should.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the four of us really represent, some of the different phases of caregiving. I mean, Amy Goyer has had decades of experience in caregiving, very intense caregiving, and she's now in the after caregiving phase, which has been tremendously difficult for her because she's been doing it for so long. Denise is still supporting her parents. Lillian cares for a spouse and has cared for others as well. And then I'm caring for my daughter and have cared for my grandparents. So, we represent that spectrum of all ages, all stages. And that's
all you need now is a male caregiving voice.
Yes, that is true. Love to have you.
Oh, I'd like to get back.
There are some months where there are 5 weeks in a month, and that we tend to, say, what do we do with this extra week? So there may be an opening there.
Keep me in mind. I'll be happy to jump on.
Love that.
Yeah,
love that.
So, are there any projects you're working on right now that you'd like our listeners to know about?
Yes, I am in the process of working actually with a wonderful millennial caregiver, Rachel Hiles from takingcareofgrandma.com, and she's been prominent on social media lately with the SCAN Foundation's You Give a Care campaign, which is raising awareness about millennial caregivers. So she is a wonderful person, but she also is a talented web tech guru, and I'm working with her to change my website and make it more of a resource hub for caregivers, and I'm really trying to shift my focus from client work, even though the clients I have are generally in the caregiving space and I love writing about caregiving. I want to write more in my own voice and not the voice of the client. So I am hoping to launch in the new year. Same address. You can reach me at michelleseitzer.com or caregivingadvice.com. So either one, you can find me there. And the website is up and active now, but in the next couple of months, you'll be seeing some new additions, and I hope to be sharing more of my own perspectives on caregiving and the caregiving life and my experiences and the stories of others, and just make it a place where people can find the information they need, find the person they need, to guide them at wherever they are in their caregiving journey. So I'm really looking forward to what's to come there. So.
And it's so important to be able to not only share resources, but to share experiences, because when we share our experiences, which is relatable to sharing our stories, then we know that we're reaching out to folks and being proactive instead of reactive, which happens so often in caregiving. Right. So goodness, Michelle, I can't thank you enough for joining me today. It's just we could talk for hours. So you have an open invitation to be on the show.
Okay.
And if you
continued then.
If you want to think about being a podcaster, we can. It'd be great to have you on the network as a podcaster. So
I'd love to. Yeah. I'd love to.
Yeah, and Michelle, with the work that you're doing, with your writing and sharing stories, you're certainly someone who's creating healing ties all around us. I can't thank you enough for doing this today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And this was a lot of fun. I'll be talking to you about podcasting. So thank you for making it a seamless experience for this writer who would prefer to write a paper instead of do the oral report.
What a great conversation today with Michelle Seitzer. And one of the great takeaways for me from our conversation was when Michelle mentioned making room in the margins. Goodness, for every caregiver, we need to make some room in the margins, especially as relating to our own self-care. I encourage you to check out Michelle at her website, michelleseitzer.com, and visit Michelle, Denise, Amy, and Lillian every Tuesday at 1 p.m. on their Care Chat on Twitter. That's #CareChat. As you know, I'm your host, Chris McClellan, the Bowtie Guy. I'm creating a life to love after caregiving ends through radio, writing, travel, advocacy, and being with awesome people like Michelle Seitzer. We'll see you for another episode of Healing Ties real soon. Bye-bye.